everyone. Welcome to Living One. I am your host, Olivia Crossman. Living One is Kerulos' monthly webinar series, now in its 5th year. With guest speakers from around the world, we listen in to how people are bringing their ethics, minds, and lives into alignment with nature for earth and animal liberation and revitalization. We ask the question, we know what's wrong, but what does right look like? Most importantly, how do we get from wrong to right? When there is so much to change and heal, where do we begin? What's the first step? What's the path each of us can undertake to make positive, deep, transformative change, not only as individuals, but as a collective whole? What is ours to do? Let's talk about it. This year, Living One hosts and hears from individuals who have forged a range of unique and inspiring paths to help transform and heal Earth, animals, and human society. Join us for another year of rich conversations to learn how, individually and in community, we can take the necessary, concrete, timely steps towards a right world, a world of peace and wellness for all Earth beings. Our guest today is Kristin Flyntz. Kristin is an assistant editor of Dark Matter Women Witnessing, an online literary journal. Dark Matter publishes writing and artwork created in response to an age of massive species loss and ecological collapse. The journal is a home for dreams, visions, and communications with the non-human world, especially those that seek to heal our broken relationship to the earth. Her writing has appeared in Dark Matter, Women Witnessing, Cloud Women's Dream Society, The Pivot, Addressing Global Problems Through Local Action, and the Corona Transmissions, Alternatives for Engaging with COVID-19 from the Physical to the Metaphysical. By day, she is a marketing executive for a retirement services organization and leads an editorial content team. Kristin lives in northern Connecticut on unceded land of the Algonkian Peoples with her musician husband Russ and feline teachers and companions Ophelia and Zoe. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are all currently on various Indigenous lands. I am currently on the ancestral homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, which includes the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. This land exists also as a place of trade with other Indigenous communities, including the Ho-Chunk, Miami, Menominee, Sauk, and Meskwaki. The Kerulos Center for Nonviolence is located on the homelands of the grizzly bear, takelma, daku betete, coyote, coho salmon, golden eagle, and gray wolf. Finally, we ask that all of us participate with full respect and attention to each other in the spirit of peace and wisdom that Living One seeks to foster. So, without further ado, we welcome Kristin Flyntz.
Hello, Olivia. It's lovely to see you and to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. We can start off today with our first question. If you could just tell us a little bit about what you cared about as a child, what you were passionate about, and were these interests encouraged?
I was a curious and creative kid. I loved art, particularly drawing. I loved being outdoors. My aunt Beverly tells a story about, she used to come and visit when I was very young, and she would take me on walks, and she would say it would take forever just to get to the end of the driveway because I'd be squatting down, pointing at the ants, following them, trying to figure out what they were up to. I loved books. I was a voracious reader as a child. I loved mystery. When I was 6, we moved to Wallingford, Connecticut, and at the back of the yard, there was a deep woods, and I loved those woods. I loved the squirrels and the birds, and it seems so quaint now, but I remember sitting on a fallen log and just wanting to be the Snow White of Jonathan Road, have the birds swirling around my head and the squirrels hopping on my knee. And I loved beauty. I've always loved beauty. And as for whether those things were encouraged, I think certainly my creativity was encouraged. I had art lessons for many years, and I think it was recognized as a talent, maybe even a gift. I don't know that I ever sensed that it would make a good career choice. Whether or not this is true, I think what I internalized was that there was a hope for something with a little more built-in stability.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's very much how we think of careers in the creative fields, that they're very spontaneous and not something that can really be nailed down. So if you're looking for more stability, or that's kind of stability is what's expected of you, it can certainly think it can be feel like the creativity needs to be put in a relegated to a different part of your life, not the stability
Yes.
part.
Yes.
But that sounds lovely. Those woods in your yard. It's like sounds like where fairies and fairies would live and prosper. Like, what a magical place to be a kid.
Yes.
But leading in, you said so that wasn't something that you considered as a career path. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do now for work, and also just in your life and what you enjoy?
Sure. Well, you did a great job in the introduction. By day, I work in marketing, and certainly, in addition to enabling me to earn a living, it has been an outlet for creativity. Um, Not the kind necessarily that I was exploring as a young person, but certainly there's writing involved, and we work with graphic designers, so there is an artistic element there. And
Yeah.
I work with a wonderful group of writers who are full of inspiration and innovation, and that's always exciting to be in their midst. And
Mhm.
then you talked a little bit about dark matter, which really for
Mhm.
me is a labor of love, because in addition to being a journal of beautiful, hard, difficult writing and artwork, it has become a community. And I'll say a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
It used to be when the journal first came out that our editor, Lisa Weil, would write an editorial for each issue, and it would sort of frame up the main themes that would be covered within the issue. And she might tie it to things that were happening in the current day. She would make other literary references, but it was personal. It was from her. And over the years, that's evolved such that we bring together the contributors on a Zoom call. And before we all get together as a group, they all read each other's work
Mhm.
so that when we gather, they are prepared to provide commentary on each other's work and support, but also there is this beautiful weaving that happens. And we're able to go deeper into the theme or themes of a particular issue and see how these pieces are talking to each other, if you
Mhm.
will.
Mhm.
One of the wonderful things that's come out of it is we've heard contributors say after these calls, I feel less alone carrying what I'm carrying, um,
Mhm.
because the content can be difficult in that it is coming face to face with the truths and realities of what is happening on the planet and how that is affecting people and animals and trees and elementals. But it also, to me, provides this incredible connection and web to the multiverse,
Mhm.
because we're not limiting ourselves to the material plane.
Mhm.
The ancestors are present, the spirits are present, the past and the future are present
Mhm.
in these endeavors. So it's very rich and deep, and that I think it is my heart's work in a lot of ways.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's incredible, and so I think so important to have that foster that kind of community. I mean, especially today, but among people who are doing what they can, or just trying to put words to the problems that they see and experience. And because there's
Yeah.
so much, the rhetoric of what's one person going to do, what difference can a single individual make when the problems are as big as they are. And hearing about communities like that it's always very inspiring to me, because it is like, of course we are individual, but there's so much power that exists when people come together like that. And just even just like you said about encouraging people to keep writing, keep sharing, keep thinking about these things, keep connecting with others who are thinking about these things, and makes everybody feel less alone. And I think that will
Exactly.
help them continue to do the work that we need them to do.
Exactly. Yes.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. That's really lovely. And when you think about, what you said at first about creativity as a child and reading, and what a lovely synthesis of those things, and with other people too, that's really lovely.
I feel very fortunate. And as a child, I was introverted. I still am. So a
Mm,
lot of my creative work was done on a solitary basis.
yeah.
And dark matter just creates this wonderful circle where everyone is welcome and all voices are considered welcome and necessary and possessing a particular wisdom to that woman.
Yeah,
Um, so
that's
it's
amazing.
great.
Can I ask you about the name? Where did dark matter come from?
Oh, yes. Well, the universe is comprised primarily of dark matter. It's
Mm,
all that we cannot see. So when we think about the journal's mission of connecting with ancestors, spirits, elementals, um, it just really speaks to the title of the
mm,
journal. There's so much we do not know. And I think that's something else that comes up a lot when we have these community conversations
yeah.
is that in our culture, we place tremendous value on knowing things.
Mm,
And I think what the journal often lays bare is how much we do not know and may never know. And instead of holding fast to the answers or what we believe to be the answers, can we hold the questions? Can
mm,
we live with questions and not have an answer? What does that look like? What does that feel like? And
mm,
how does it change us
yeah.
being in that place of not knowing?
Mm, yeah. That's a powerful question. It makes me think of I think it was John O'Donohue who talks about like the wonder that you possess
Mm,
as a child, and just you look at a tree and it's like you don't know that it's a tree. It's just this thing in front of you, and the wonder that children like lead with, and how as we get older it's like we don't lose it, we just lose touch with it. I think he says
yes,
something along the lines of that, and that growing as you grow up, being able to continue to just like access that wonder is just vital for our joy and contentment in life. And it made me think of what you were saying, made me think of that, because of the our like inability to sit with the question, is like if we can just hold the question and like wonder at the answer, then a whole new world opens up. It's like the minute he says something about the minute we see a tree as a tree, we don't have to wonder what it is anymore. It's like now we know it's a tree, and so it kind of something turns off, instead of just like staring at everything and just like here's this thing before me and I wonder what it is, and what the power in that kind of curiosity that I find so inspiring.
I just got full body goosebumps when you said that. It's so true, isn't it? That there can be tremendous power in naming something.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in our culture, what you just said about closing down the wonder, it's like coming back to that answer, right? We have the answer, there's nothing more to explore, and we're on
Mm-hmm.
to the next. So
Yeah.
I just love what you said.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that spoke definitely, it spoke to me too when I read that for the first time, because it's just such a, and it just speaks so much, I think, to how we approach things now, where it's like we think we know a thing about being here, and so we
Mm.
feel like we've concluded all there is to explore in that area and we move on. But it's like I just feel like that leaves a lot of stones left unturned, that there is just so much possibility to just wonder at what else is out there. And I do think that can be, as far as thinking about the cosmos or wherever you want to go with that, I know it can be overwhelming and very scary to think about like what all is there that we don't understand and we don't know. But I think that also it's like can open up such possibility for community. It's like there's so much else out there that we exist within, and that's always been a comfort to me. So when I was reading what he wrote about that and listening to what you said a minute ago, it's just like that feels opening up these questions is like, I don't know, it's like connecting back with wonder and just like what all might be out there, and
Yeah.
what fun.
I love
um,
that.
Yeah, but you were saying, as far as your work today with Dark Matter, and also I know you've written for them and other publications, as well as the way you spoke about marketing and how even that connects to who you are and what you've cared about throughout your life. Do you think that there was something ever in your childhood, young adulthood, whatever that might be, some kind of pivotal experience that brought you to the work you do today, and work generally speaking, not necessarily your job, but just what you feel you're doing here and here to do?
To me, this is such a deep and complicated question,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it shouldn't be. But you touched on it earlier, the losing the childlike wonder. Um, I think as I moved out of childhood into pre-teenage years and teenage years, I didn't really have a lot of models for making an ardent pursuit
Mm-hmm.
of what made me feel most alive. I'll tell you a quick story if you can bear with
Please.
me. When I was in elementary school, I had a teacher that used to take the class out on nature walks in the woods behind the school.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved these walks. I mean, I loved them. She would teach us about the trees and the leaves and the lichen and the mushrooms and the birds that we were seeing or hearing but couldn't see. She would talk about the seasons, and the wind was on our face or the sun was on our face, and it felt like liberation and emancipation from that cold, sterile classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved those walks so much that I started to ask for them. I started to really nag her about them. Can we do one this week, Mrs. James? Can we please do one this week? And I remember she wrote in my report card, and I'm paraphrasing because this was many moons ago, but something along the lines of, you cannot focus only on the things that interest you. You need to apply yourself to all of the work if you're going to be a well-rounded person. And I had very mixed feelings about that as a young person.
Yeah.
And I still have mixed feelings about it
Yeah.
because I wonder what the world would look like or my life would look like if from the very earliest stages, when a child begins to tell the world who she is or who he is, what her gifts and passions and talents and proclivities are, rather than eventually encouraging that child to conform to the societal norms.
Yeah.
The family, the teachers, the community rallied around that child and said, we're going to help you fine tune and hone and grow this gift that you've been given so that is what you bring to the world. not just today, but 5 years and 10 years and 50 years down the road. And that's a lot of words, but I had a friend who described that very kind of attention and encouragement to me once, and it really stuck with me.
Yeah.
I think for many, many years, I was trying so hard to fit the mold, or what I thought was the mold I was supposed to fit, that I really lost touch with that artsy, curious, creative, sensitive kid.
Yeah.
And in my mind, when I think about that, it's like picking up pieces of armor and just putting them on one by one, layer after layer, right? You've got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You've got to suck it up, figure out how you're going to make it work, and do it. So there are elements of her, that young person, in the work I do today, but I almost feel like this next phase of my life, perhaps the rest of my life, will really be about finding my way back to her, finding my way back to the wonder, the joy, the unbridled excitement about everything the world has to offer, and particularly the natural world.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. And there's so much that's so important about what you just said. And it just makes me think you just spoke so beautifully to what we're trying to do here with this specific Living One series that we're focusing on for the year, because everything you just said is exactly what really initiated this idea to focus on like individual people and their specific journey. Because the more people we speak to and the more stories we hear, they all follow such a similar trajectory to what you just expressed about how you start out with this knowing of who you are and what you're doing here and what you love, what you care about. And we're all just funneled very much into the box, onto the conveyor belt, however you want to think about it. And it's very hard not to lose touch with those things that made you in the world. And then so there's just such a journey of returning back to that person and to those things. And at Kerulos, we talk a lot in our meetings and our gatherings about how if each of us is put here with something that we want to contribute, big, small, medium, whatever it may be, that like the greatest work in our life is just being able to contribute that thing. And it often feels, I think, like there are so many things standing in the way of doing that, as you just spoke to, and there is such power to it.
I don't know if this is true for you, but whenever the topic of what is your life's purpose comes up, or what is your calling, or what are you here to contribute, I think our culture has become so accustomed. It's so driven by media and seeing people who are doing things on a grand scale, right? Striving or actually making a huge impact and promoting it one way or another across the airwaves, across the social media channels. You know, the whole concept of having a personal brand and promoting your personal brand. I often feel like I have no idea what I can contribute in the face of that. The scale I'm operating on is so small by comparison. I'm not sure what I could say that would be meaningful or have an impact. But that's the culture talking.
Yes.
That's the culture talking.
Yeah.
I think what I want to say in response to your question is I am here for beauty,
Mm-hmm.
to see it, to recognize it, to praise it, to call it out, to show it to others. But just, and I don't mean this to sound flip because it is a work in itself.
Yeah.
Sitting quietly
Mm.
for 5 minutes so I can watch the sun come up or go down and not be assaulted by thoughts and ideas and things that I have to do. And, do you know,
Yeah.
so if I say I'm here for beauty, it may be my life's work
Mm.
to spend those 5 minutes in complete silence with my attention on nothing but
Mm.
the setting sun.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And I think you're so right when you say that it's the culture speaking, when it's like there's something about that thing within us, when it's like maybe it's just for us. It's like it doesn't have to be publicized or anything, just those 5 minutes. And it's like we can't, maybe the inclination is to say that's not enough, or what's that going to do in the grand scheme, or any of that. But I think going back even just to what we were talking about a minute ago, it's like there's so much that we can't see and we don't understand. And those moments, if that's what you're here for, and it's like what speaks to you and makes you feel like you, then it's like I would personally be inclined to say that the magnitude of the impact that might have is beyond what our human brains can really conceive of. It's like something that we feel and not necessarily know. And
Yes,
those things are so important.
I agree. I We place such a premium on what can we see and touch and feel? Is it tangible? Is it measurable? What's the ROI?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think and I don't know anything about physics really, but
Yeah.
if we open things up on a quantum level and
Mm-hmm.
consider that there are multiple planes of existence happening simultaneously, then who knows what ripple effects a particular action, however small, if it's coming from a place of purity and is not doing harm, we don't know. We just don't know.
Mm-mm. Absolutely. And I think it's like there's so much that we do in the day to day, and in this culture that we live in, that's like it's strayed so far from that like purity and just that wholeness, and yet we will accept those things as important and necessary, like the working and the commuting and the hustle and the rush. It's like those are not things that come from that place of like purity and oneness, and yet we'll regard them as more important than the things that do come from this place of just like who we are and what we're trying to express. And it's like if these things are allowed to be, why are these things not allowed to be? And don't they kind of influence each other a little bit? Because there's just so much of everything that you've just said about what like speaks to you, even in those moments of quiet. It's like it seems small, but then if you think about all the individual people who probably feel the same way and can't access it, or feel like they're not allowed to access it, it's like, what if everybody was just like liberated in it, and we could all sit in those moments of 5 minutes of quiet? Like, I think that would change the world. It could.
It could.
Or change an individual's world, which that's the other thing I was thinking when you were speaking about how you feel you're here to bring beauty or to notice beauty. And what you were saying in the beginning of our conversation about the community of dark matter, and the people who gather there to share, and just how much inherent beauty there is in that. It's like, that's just, and maybe it's not like, the largest impact anyone's ever had, but it's like for those individual people, it's like could change their whole world, and then who knows what they go on to do. And that's exactly what we're trying to talk about right now with people in Living One this year, is that exact thing, because it's so hard to be on the path you're supposed to be on, or you feel you're supposed to be on, and feel completely alone in it. And those kinds of communities, and just discussion of those communities, I think, so people know that they're out there, are powerful. So I'm so grateful for everything you've shared so far. I'm already learning so much from our chat.
Oh, thank you. Well, I should have said this at the beginning, but if you or any of your viewers or listeners are interested, you can read the journal at darkmatterwomenwitnessing.com. It's all one word.
Fantastic. That's great. We usually put in the caption of the YouTube video the links that our speaker would like to share. So we'll put that in there and everybody can access it, because I think this is right in the Kerulos niche of the kinds of things people are interested in here. So I bet they'd like to see it.
Thank you. And I do want to say too that I recognize how much of the work that you're doing at Kerulos is intended to help people find these moments of inner peace and solitude and presence and awareness. Yeah, that is one of the hardest things for me. So I really appreciate the attention that all of you are giving to that.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an ongoing journey and commitment. And I know for me, it's just the awareness that it's out that there are other people working on these things has been completely life-changing. So the opportunity to talk about that with others and bring other people into it is, I just feel lucky to be a part of it. But so you spoke about your path and to the work you're doing now. Was there ever a point at which you explored other paths? You did allude to that a little bit with saying in your young adulthood, with the different pressures and constraints that might have been present. Were there other paths that you considered in your life?
I uh, I think the short answer is not really. Um, I I went into college and I think I came out rather lost. I just didn't have a sense of my place. I didn't have a sense of what I wanted that fit the map that I had been given. If I did, I didn't know how to articulate it. I didn't know to ask for support in getting there. So I sort of cobbled some things together after college and was very fortunate to get a job relatively quickly. And it wasn't a job that fit me very well, but it did give me skills and certifications that let me get to the next one, which oddly enough led to the next one and the next and the next. I think the thread through all of those steps was communication. I I think communication is so essential. And I think all of those years of reading helped me a bit. I was able to string a few words together at a time. But no, I toyed with the idea. There was a period a number of years ago when I left the corporate world to work at a nonprofit.
Hmm.
It was actually an all-girls school, and that was in many ways an incredible opportunity. I do have to say that it was radically inspiring
Hmm.
every day to be in the midst of all of that girl energy. They
Hmm.
were just so alive, you know, um, with all the hopes and the dreams and the possibilities and the angst and the emotion. It was just like the air was always vibrating with them. So that was really neat. It was also a communications role.
Mhm.
Um, and during that time, I did some directing of Eve Ensler's work, which was
Hmm.
very, very exciting as well. That
Very
was
cool.
another creative outlet during that period of time. But
Yeah.
for the most part, I've been in the corporate world my entire career.
Yeah. And do you think, and I think you've spoken to this already, but I guess the integration of these values that you have and have spoken to as far as beauty and communications and creativity, do you feel that these things and their place in your life are integrated with whether it's your work or your worldview, relationships? Do you feel these things are integrated into your world in that way?
I Yes, in many ways. Um, Probably not as much as I would like them to be, and that's primarily because I'm still so much a work in progress, as though the universe feels my longing to
Mm,
be more integrated
yeah.
and sends me helpers to sort of tap me on the shoulder and say, "Oh, this is an area you might want to take a look at." The trees have been very instrumental in that regard.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I know in the excerpts you sent me with the first one that you spoke about the dogwood trees, and it sounds to me like they were helpers a little bit with where they were placed, and you're reckoning with that. If you want to share a little bit about that.
Sure. Uh, this is an unfinished story, but I'd be happy to read from it if it might help illustrate the point.
Absolutely. If you want to, it's up to you.
Sure, sure. And you can let me know if I'm going over it. If you want me to stop at any point, please feel free to let me know. But this is from a story called Entwined. The dogwoods would have to go. It was 2018, and they stood side by side like fraternal twins at the southern corner of our house. 5 years earlier, I had said something to my husband about their not being able to stay there, some part of me foreseeing an uncomfortable future for all of us and wanting to nip it in the bud, as it were, while they were young and adaptable, like uprooting your child in pre-K as opposed to in high school. He said we would have to wait to do it until summer was over, before the weather turned cold. We got busy. Fall turned to winter, but there was time. When I brought it up the following year, and each year thereafter, it seemed my timing was off, always too early or too late in the season, and besides, they were still quite small. There was time. Once a trio of black bear cubs had climbed the dogwood's still tender branches, then laden with red berries, and rode them all the way to the ground. We gasped and grimaced as the boughs bent and arced toward the earth under the weight of those glossy young bodies. Yet, despite this rough treatment, the dogwoods had survived and were growing like my preteen nephews in wild bursts, the deep green leaves of the larger one almost touching the bay window. We need to move them, I said. They're getting too big, too close to the house. It's too late, my husband replied. We'll have to wait until the fall. Not long after, a friend who knew nothing of our dogwoods emailed me Jane Hirschfield's poem, Tree. It is foolish to let a young redwood grow next to a house. Even in this one lifetime, you will have to choose. That great calm being, this clutter of soup pots and books. Already, the first branch tips brush at the window. Softly, calmly, immensity taps at your life. The poem pierced me like an arrow. The timing, the content, it was so uncanny, so particular. I sent it to my husband, hoping it might spark a conversation about the choice before us. The mostly wooded land we call home is also the home or range to black bears, foxes, coyotes, possums, raccoons, chipmunks, gray, red, and black squirrels, flying squirrels, voles, wild turkeys, field mice, bobcats, salamanders, black snakes, skunks, and myriad birds, among other beings. The yard, as it were, was mostly feral. Each May, where grass used to be, vast swaths of vibrant purple ajuga flowers, or bugleweed, stretch out in welcome of the pollinators that love them. An overgrown garden in the back provided shelter and protection for bunnies, birds, and other small creatures. And so it was not my desire to move the dogwoods. By then, their roots were established, spreading out under the earth in a circumference that mirrors their burgeoning canopies, and were no doubt entwined. They would be very heavy, would need a spot large enough to accommodate them, and the right amount of sun, and, for a season, regular watering. What if it was another drought year? We would be obligated, would we not, to give the trees every chance to thrive if we uprooted them without their consent? But if we left them, eventually they would obscure the view from the window, their branches bending against the glass in the siding. It would be easier for bugs to enter the house, like the carpenter ants that made their annual return, arriving in every downstairs room simultaneously and prompting the familiar, agonizing conversation. Do we call the exterminator? Is there a non-toxic option? In the summer of 2017, after several winters of heavy snow that repeatedly took out the electricity, an army of orange trucks rolled into town, advertising their tree services in bold black letters. Their mission was to prune or remove any trees that encroached upon the power lines and could cause disruption. They worked their way west up Route 20, which is perpendicular to the end of our road. From morning to night, the humid July air was filled with the whine and scream of the saws and the sickly sweet smell of burning wood flesh commingled with gasoline and diesel. We heard the pop and snap of breaking spines over the steady, threatening rumble of the trucks and the coarse voices of the men in matching vests and hard hats. We felt it when severed limbs and broken bodies landed on the earth. We cringed and shuddered as many of them were ground into dust. All the while, a rushing current of cars drove past, their drivers confident that come winter, the power lines would be safer. There would be no storm-toppled trees to slow our passage, our progress. Multiple times during those gruesome days, I lamented our focus on human concerns at the expense of the living world. Yet not 12 months later, the voice in my head said we should only need to move the dogwoods a few yards to create a win-win for all involved. The trees would have a space of their own, and we would mitigate physical risks to the house, avoid a potential increase in our insurance premium, and protect the resale value, which would surely suffer from an obscured view and a compromised foundation. At the time, I thought I was being a responsible homeowner. According to the values I was raised with, I was. But even then, I saw the incongruence of my reaction to the previous summer's tree call and my current predicament with the dogwoods. Saw that I wanted it both ways, to pat myself on the back for moving the trees instead of killing them, and to know that I was protecting our long-term financial interests. Neither my husband nor I ever mentioned the email about moving the trees. It had still not registered for me that this was my fixation, not his. like Hirschfield's tree poem, or like a dream, a memory arose, unbidden. It was the image that inspired our wedding program, 2 trees entwined. I hadn't thought of it in years, had nearly forgotten it. The upper portion of the image depicts 2 robust trees with beautiful full canopies standing side by side, branches interlaced. The lower portion of the image shows their roots, entwined in an exquisitely intricate web of interdependence and mutual exchange. It is in the roots that the union occurs. In the roots, where the tree's strength is derived and an essential and inextricable bond is formed, where responsibility to and for each other is made manifest. The tree as we see it above ground cannot survive without its roots, which make life and growth possible. The poem, the image, and the dogwoods were asking me to examine my roots, my values, my loyalties. What do I stand for? And what do I stand from? Who and what do I tend and allow to flourish or prune into manageability? To and for whom am I responsible? What will I sacrifice to become whole instead of only living on the surface? Through the bay window, I watched the larger dogwood lean into the mid-afternoon sun and receive the familiar weight of the goldfinch and his mate. Their delicate feet gripped its branches, trusting they would be held as they rested between feedings, grooming themselves and each other. Bees hovered and glided from flower to flower, their soothing drone traveling along the tree's branches, the energetic hum and thrum of life engaged with life. Someday soon, I thought, the house will cramp the tree's ability to stretch freely in all directions, and the foundation will resist the entry of the deepest part of the tree. I looked over the tops of the young dogwoods and past them, my gaze coming to rest in the middle distance. Softly, gently, immensity tapped at my life. It is 6 years later, and the dogwoods are still with us at the southern corner of the house. Bears and storms have taken most of the limbs of the smaller tree. By some miracle, or perhaps due to the support of the larger tree, the remaining limbs are covered in flowers. The larger tree has not grown into the window. In fact, he arcs gently toward the center of the yard, away from the house. The foundation is fine, at least for now. None of my dire predictions came true, after all. I am learning that to be entwined is necessarily inclusive of all the lives in our ecosystem. When we put down roots in a place, it comes with obligations to everyone who lives there. It is May, so in our ecosystem, the lawn is a purple carpet of bugleweed. Honeybees and bumblebees are busy collecting pollen. The dogwood's milky white blooms glow in the afternoon light as a single hummingbird arrives to drink beneath their branches. Sorry, that was a little longer than I thought it would be.
Not at all. It's so beautiful, just the way you describe everything. It's like I can see the whole picture. It's very, I think it speaks so much to everything that we've been talking about today, especially you said at one point about what you sacrifice to become whole and not just live on the surface is, I think sacrifice is like such an excellent word there. And just even from the beginning of our conversation about like having that creativity stir within you and not feeling like that was an acceptable path to pursue for a career and for the stability, and just every step after that of continuing to weave all of the values that you've spoken to into your life, and what has to be, I mean, there's sacrifice in both directions, because if you don't weave these things in, of course, you're sacrificing a piece of yourself, but it's also, and I guess that's something we haven't quite spoken about, yet today is just the sacrifice that is kind of inherent, and also just forging your path and continuing to hold those things that are true to you very closely. And I wonder if maybe before we wrap up, you can share a little bit about the barriers or the struggle that you have faced in continuing to weave these traits and your authenticity into your life in the way it is now. And I know you said there's more to be integrated, and I imagine that's like an ongoing process, but up to this point, I guess, what you've encountered.
It is most definitely an ongoing process.
Mm-hmm.
And for a number of years now, I've worked with Dina Metzger. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Yeah.
Um, she's a brilliant teacher, writer.
Mm-hmm.
Every aspect of her life is devoted to ensuring a viable future for all beings on the earth. And one of the things I've learned from Dina is the practice of self-scrutiny.
Mm.
And so, to your question of sacrifice, I mean, there are so many things about our modern lives that ultimately each of us will have to reckon with, and what are we willing to sacrifice. But I think for me, what comes up in the moment is constantly sacrificing the ideas I want to have about who I am,
Mm.
the stories I tell myself
Mm.
about the kind of person that I am. The the entwined story, I think, is a really good example of that, because I'm having this dilemma with the dogwoods,
Mm.
and I really haven't decided what are we going to do. I mean, the pull between my material investments, right? The house, the insurance, the foundation, all of that was right up against my love of trees.
Mm.
The inner knowing that they have a right to their lives too.
Mm.
And was I going to impose my human will on these trees that give us so much beauty, that give shelter and food to the beings who live here?
Mm.
I mean, that immensity tapping at my life, I really felt it.
Yeah.
It was very real.
Mm.
And yet, when those orange trucks showed up, I had no problem passing judgment, as if what they were doing wasn't just several degrees away from what I was contemplating.
Mm.
Their mission was to trim and prune and cut for the safety of and convenience of humans.
Mm.
And I'm thinking about trimming, pruning, cutting, moving for the protection of the house.
Mm.
So I feel as though the trees were very gentle but direct
Mm.
teachers.
Yeah.
And you might think that I would come out of that experience having learned a thing or two about what's happening up
Mm.
here, so that I can make my actions okay. I
Mm.
can make my choices more palatable.
Mm.
But just this past May, I was at a writing retreat in Vermont, and it was a version of that lesson all over again.
Mm.
So when I say that I think it will be a life's work for me to continue peeling away the layers, not just of acculturation, but of ego,
Yeah.
this really deeply embedded sense that I know something
Yeah.
about myself, about other people. Increasingly, I'm trying to and train my brain. If you think you know something, stop. Just stop right there. Take a breath and look more deeply, because there's a really good chance, if I know it, I can make a quick decision and get on with my day and not think about the downstream impacts of that decision. I might, if I think I know something, I might not have to engage in a really difficult conversation. I might not be able to get exactly what I want when I want it. All of these privileges that knowing something gives me, I have to question them continuously. And that's challenging. And sometimes it feels really icky. So I think that's what comes up for me when you ask about sacrifice.
Yeah.
It's the typical ways of thinking are what I need to sacrifice, because that's what's gotten us into this mess.
Yeah. That's so powerful, and it's just further illustrates what you were speaking to earlier about what we know and then what we stop questioning, and why these questions and holding these questions in mind as we go about our lives and our days is so important. And I think that's such wisdom, and that's just such it's so crucial to hold that in mind. So I appreciate everything you've shared about that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to share, final reflections, or any other excerpts or pieces you'd like to read before we close?
Invite other people to join me in trying to reconnect with the young parts of themselves that really did know something at a deep, intuitive, soul, body level about the real nature of the world and our connection to it and with it. And to know that they are not alone. It is a very big world, and there's a lot we cannot see. But when I look out, in spite of all of the suffering, there's so much suffering. Alongside the suffering, there is still so much beauty. And I believe that beauty comes from an origin that is incredibly loving and benevolent, and wants us to remember how connected we really are to each other and to all of life. And is so willing to support us in myriad ways. So we're not alone.
Oh, that's beautiful, Kristin. What a nice note to end on. Thank you for everything you've shared with us today, your time, your work, everything, your wisdom. It's been incredible and so lovely to speak with you. Thank you, Olivia. You're a wonderful interviewer, and I have so enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. And everyone joining us on YouTube, thank you for tuning in. Our next Living One speaker will be on August 30th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We will welcome Paul Moss, the co-founder and executive director of the Plant Initiative, a nonprofit organization working to increase respect for plants, who has also served as executive director of the Minnesota-based grant-making Cottonwood Foundation since 1992. If you enjoy Living One and feel called to support Kerulos, Living One, and all of our sanctuary residents, please consider donating at the link on our website, kerulos.org. Once again, thank you, everybody, and Kristin, for sharing your time with us. We really appreciate you being here, and we will see you next time. Thank you.